As the light of Rome flickered and faded in the west, a new dawn began to rise in the east, a flame that refused to die. From the ashes of the crumbling empire, a new world was forged, the Byzantine Empire, the last echo of ancient Rome, yet a civilization all its own. It began with a man whose vision transcended centuries, Emperor Constantine the Great. In the early 4th century, when the Roman world was fractured by civil wars and consumed by decay, Constantine sought not destruction, but rebirth. He dreamed of an empire reborn, purified, fortified, eternal. In the year 330 AD, he chose a site on the Bosporus, a narrow strait between Europe and Asia, and built his new Rome. It was a city of unparalleled beauty, guarded by the sea, blessed by trade, and destined for immortality. He named it Constantinople, the city of Constantine. Where the ancient world's east met west, Constantinople rose, golden domes glinting under the rising sun, vast walls stretching for miles, and churches echoing with the chants of a new faith, Christianity. It would soon become the heart of a civilization that would stand for more than 1,000 years. Constantine's reign marked the transformation of Rome's pagan empire into a Christian one. Yet this new empire would not be a mere continuation, it was a metamorphosis. Latin faded, and Greek emerged as the tongue of scholars and saints. Old gods fell silent, and the cross rose high above the city's skyline. Still, the ghosts of Rome lingered. Its senators, legions, and laws all transplanted eastward, molded into something new. Byzantium was Roman in structure, Greek in spirit, and Christian in soul. But no empire is born without blood. When Constantine died, his heirs tore the empire apart in wars of ambition. Civil wars, invasions, and betrayals tested the strength of the newborn realm. And yet, the Byzantine spirit endured. Out of chaos emerged emperors of iron and faith. Theodosius the Great united the empire once more, but with his death in 395 AD, the Roman Empire was forever split in two. The West, weak and crumbling, fell to the barbarians. The East, stronger, richer, wiser, lived on. When the city of Rome fell to the Germanic warlord Odoacer, the world wept. But in Constantinople, life went on. Its streets still glittered with gold, its scholars still debated philosophy, its churches still rang with the sound of hymns. The Byzantines did not see themselves as survivors, they were Romans, the heirs of Caesar and Augustus. The empire now stretched across Greece, Anatolia, the Balkans, and parts of North Africa. Its armies were disciplined, its bureaucracy refined, its rulers divinely appointed. But beneath the marble and the mosaics, a question lingered. Could this empire endure where Rome had failed? In the early 5th century, the empire faced waves of invasions, Huns from the steppe, Goths from the forests, Persians from the east. Yet the city stood firm behind the Theodosian walls, a masterpiece of engineering that would protect Constantinople for nearly 1,000 years. Those walls became more than stone. They were the symbol of Byzantine's resilience. For while kingdoms rose and fell, Constantinople remained untaken, the shining heart of Christendom. By the 6th century, under Emperor Justinian I, the empire would reach its first golden age. But that is another chapter, one of glory and ruin, of triumph and plague. For now, in the rise of Constantinople, we witness the rebirth of an empire, not the old Rome of the Caesars, but something far more enduring. The Byzantine Empire was not a relic of the past. It was a bridge, from antiquity to the Middle Ages, from paganism to faith, from chaos to civilization. It was the empire that refused to die. In its walls lay the soul of Rome. In its heart, the spirit of a new world. Thus began the story of the Byzantines, the keepers of the flame, the guardians of an empire that defied time itself. In the heart of Constantinople, the light of faith burned brighter than any flame. By the dawn of the 6th century, the Byzantine Empire stood as the beacon of Christian civilization, a fusion of Roman law, Greek intellect, and divine purpose. Its emperor ruled not merely as a man, but as the chosen of God. And under one such ruler, Justinian I, the empire soared to unmatched glory. Born in the humble lands of Illyria, Justinian rose from obscurity to become one of the greatest emperors in human history. Guided by unshakable faith and relentless ambition, he sought to restore Rome to its ancient grandeur. His reign would bring both triumph and torment, for he dreamed not only of power, but of perfection. At his side stood a woman whose influence reshaped the empire itself, Theodora, once an actress of the Hippodrome, now Empress of the Romans. Fierce, intelligent, and fearless, she ruled as Justinian's equal, a voice of reason and defiance in a world of men. But the empire's splendor masked a dangerous tension. In 532 AD, the streets of Constantinople erupted in chaos. The Nika riots, a violent uprising born from factional rivalries, economic despair, and political rage, turned the capital into a battlefield. Flames consumed the city. Tens of thousands perished. In the imperial palace, terrified advisors begged Justinian to flee, but Theodora rose and spoke words that would echo through eternity. "Royalty is a fine burial shroud. Better to die an emperor than to live in exile." Inspired by her courage, Justinian unleashed his generals, Belisarius and Mundus, who stormed the Hippodrome and slaughtered the rebels. When the smoke cleared, Constantinople lay in ashes, but the throne remained unshaken. From the ruins rose a marvel of faith and architecture, Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom. Its vast dome seemed to float upon light itself, shimmering with golden mosaics that mirrored heaven. When Justinian beheld it completed, he is said to have cried out, "Solomon, I have surpassed thee." But his ambitions reached beyond stone and faith. He sought to reclaim the lost western provinces, Italy, North Africa, and Spain from barbarian kings. Belisarius, the emperor's most brilliant general, led the campaigns. With cunning and courage, he defeated the Vandals in North Africa and reclaimed Carthage for Rome. Then he turned westward, liberating Italy from the Ostrogoths. For a fleeting moment, Justinian's dream seemed realized. The Roman Empire was united once more. But dreams demand a terrible price. War drained the treasury, endless battles exhausted the legions, and then came the invisible enemy that no army could defeat. In 541 AD, a shadow crept over the empire, the plague of Justinian. It began in Egypt, spread through trade ships, and reached Constantinople like a thief in the night. Bodies filled the streets, the air was thick with the scent of death. It is said that at its height, 10,000 souls perished each day within the city's walls. Even Justinian himself fell ill. Though he survived, the empire never truly recovered. Faith held the people together, yet it also divided them. Theologians argued over the very nature of Christ. Was he human, divine, or both? These disputes, the Monophysite controversies, tore the empire's unity apart, sowing seeds of schism between East and West. By the 6th century, the Byzantine world stood at a crossroads. From within, it faced spiritual conflict and exhaustion. From without, a new force was rising, fierce, united, and unstoppable: the followers of Islam. The Arabs, driven by faith and fire, swept across the sands, conquering Syria, Palestine, and Egypt, lands once rich with Byzantine glory. The empire trembled. It seemed the end was near, But Byzantium was not built to fall easily. From the ashes of loss, it adapted. Under Emperor Heraclius, the Byzantine army was reformed. Soldiers became farmers, and provinces became themes, military districts that sustained their own defense. It was the birth of a new kind of empire, smaller but stronger, forged in hardship and faith. To face the Arab fleets, the Byzantines unleashed their most terrifying weapon, Greek fire, a secret mixture that burned even upon the sea. When hurled from the decks of imperial ships, it turned entire enemy fleets into floating infernos. In faith, they had found endurance. In fire, survival. Byzantium, wounded but alive, stood as the guardian of Christianity, the shield between Europe and the rising tide of Islam. The empire had faced riots, plague, and war, and yet it endured. Its faith had been tested in the crucible of fire, and from it emerged a tempered steel, ready for the centuries of struggle that lay ahead. This was Byzantium's second birth, baptized in flame, sustained by faith, an empire unbroken, awaiting its next age of glory. In our next chapter, we journey deeper into the heart of power and paradox, where icons become battlegrounds and the sword of faith turns inward.
Faith had preserved the empire, but now faith itself would become the battlefield. For centuries, the Byzantines had fought invaders at their gates. Now they would battle over the very image of God within their own walls. By the dawn of the 8th century, the empire was a wounded giant. The Arab Caliphate pressed hard from the east. The Balkans groaned under Slavic migrations. The once vast dominions of Justinian had shrunk to the rugged lands of Anatolia and the glittering city of Constantinople. Yet, amidst this turmoil, Byzantium endured, disciplined, devout, and deadly. Then came the storm, the iconoclast controversy. It began not with swords, but with prayers. Emperors and bishops clashed over a single perilous question. Should holy icons, the painted images of Christ and the saints, be venerated or destroyed? To some, these images were sacred windows into the divine. To others, they were idols, a sin against the commandment forbidding graven images. In 726 AD, Emperor Leo III, hardened by war and convinced that divine wrath had struck the empire for its idolatry, ordered the destruction of icons. Across the empire, mosaics were smashed, paintings burned, and monks defied the throne. Church stood against state. Brother turned against brother. The empire that had once stood united by faith now bled from within because of it. For more than a century the struggle raged. Emperors rose and fell, icons banned and restored, until finally, in 843 AD, Empress Theodora, another woman of courage and conviction, restored the veneration of icons, ending the schism. The event is still remembered as the triumph of orthodoxy. The Byzantine soul, torn between image and idea, emerged tempered, its faith now more mystical, its art more profound. Despite wars and heresies, Byzantium's heart still beat with brilliance. In the monasteries of Mount Athos and the libraries of Constantinople, scholars preserved the wisdom of the ancients. They copied the works of Homer, Plato, and Aristotle, texts that the West had long forgotten. The empire became a bridge between the classical past and the medieval world, the keeper of knowledge amid the darkness. But it was no scholar's peace. While philosophers wrote and theologians debated, soldiers stood guard at the empire's bleeding frontiers. The 9th and 10th centuries brought new enemies, the Bulgars to the north, the Arabs to the south, and fierce warriors from the steppes, the Rus sailing down from the Dnieper River. In 860, the Rus launched their first attack on Constantinople, a raid of terror that tested the empire's strength. But the walls, ever eternal, held. And through faith and diplomacy, the Byzantines turned their foes into allies. A century later, Prince Vladimir of Kiev would look to Byzantium for faith, and upon witnessing the majesty of the Hagia Sophia, embraced Orthodox Christianity. From that choice was born the spiritual lineage of Russia, forever tied to the Byzantine legacy. Thus, even as its borders shifted, Byzantium's spirit extended, carried through faith to lands it would never conquer by sword. And still, the empire's greatest secret guarded its survival: Greek fire. This weapon of divine terror, whose formula remains lost to history, turned entire fleets into infernos. When the Arab armadas besieged Constantinople in 717 AD, Emperor Leo III ordered his ships to unleash the fire upon the sea, and the invaders burned beneath the night sky like falling stars. The flames of faith and fire had once again saved Byzantium. From this age of turmoil emerged a new generation of emperors, hardened by war, guided by faith, and ready to reclaim what was lost. Byzantium was no longer the Rome of old. It was leaner, sharper, a warrior state cloaked in silk and scripture. Its generals were farmers, its priests were scholars, its emperors, philosopher kings. The sword and the cross had become one. In the coming centuries, this reborn empire would rise again to brilliance, its art and culture flourishing, its armies once more victorious. The world would call it a golden age. But glory, as history teaches, is a fleeting flame. Beyond the horizon waited envy, treachery, and the West's growing shadow. The next chapter would see Byzantium shine brighter than ever before, even as darkness gathered beyond its gates. In the age of the sword and the cross, Byzantium proved once more that empires fall not from defeat, but from forgetting what they stand for.
Every empire has its sunrise, and every empire has its twilight. For Byzantium, the 9th and 10th centuries were both, a dawn of brilliance and the prelude to its long descent. After centuries of war and faith, the empire emerged transformed. The iconoclasts had been silenced, the borders had steadied, and a new dynasty, the Macedonians, rose to the throne. What followed was an age of renewal, a renaissance before the Renaissance. Under emperors like Basil I, Leo VI, and Constantine VII, the empire flourished in art, law, and diplomacy. The armies marched under the double-headed eagle. The scholars wrote chronicles that would outlive them by millennia, and the churches glittered with gold mosaics that caught the light like the very breath of heaven. This was the Macedonian Renaissance, a revival of Hellenic wisdom and Christian devotion. From the halls of the great palace to the libraries of the capital, knowledge returned to life. Ancient manuscripts were copied and translated. Philosophers debated theology and reason. The Byzantines, ever guardians of the classical flame, kept the wisdom of Greece alive when the West still slumbered in darkness. Yet this brilliance was not merely of the mind. On the battlefield, the empire's power once again burned bright. Under the mighty Basil II, known to history as the Bulgar Slayer, the empire reached the height of its might. His reign, stretching nearly 50 years, was a testament to iron will and relentless discipline. He crushed rebellions, humbled noble rivals, and forged an army that none in the Balkans could withstand. At the Battle of Clydion in 1014, Basil trapped the Bulgarian army in the mountain passes. When the victory was complete, he ordered 15,000 prisoners blinded, leaving every 100th man one eye to lead the rest home. When the Bulgarian Tsar Samuel saw his maimed soldiers return, he died of heartbreak. It was brutal, and it was Byzantine. Under Basil, the empire stretched from southern Italy to the edges of Armenia, the largest it had been since Justinian's age. Gold flowed into Constantinople. The city became the jewel of the world, a place where traders from Venice, Cairo, and Kiev bowed before its splendor. But as the empire basked in triumph, decay began to whisper from within. Basil II died childless, leaving a treasury full of gold, but an empire hollowed by pride. The emperors who followed were heirs to glory they could not sustain. They squandered wealth, lavished titles to courtiers, and trusted mercenaries more than their own legions. The mighty Byzantine army, once the shield of Christendom, grew soft. Its generals, once men of iron, became politicians. And beyond the horizon, new powers stirred. From the west came the Normans, ambitious and brutal. From the east, a new threat emerged, the Seljuk Turks, fierce riders from the steppes who had embraced Islam and conquest alike. In 1071, the two worlds collided in the highlands of Manzikert. Emperor Romanus IV, Diogenes, marched east to reclaim lost lands. But treachery and chaos doomed the campaign. The Byzantine army shattered under the Seljuk onslaught, and the emperor himself was captured. Manzikert was not just a defeat, it was a turning point. Anatolia, the heartland of the empire, fell to the Turks. For the first time, the empire bled from within its body. The loss was catastrophic, but Byzantine did not die. In the chaos that followed, a new dynasty, the Komnenoi, rose to restore strength. Emperor Alexios I Komnenos, cunning and charismatic, took the throne in 1081. He rebuilt the armies, secured the borders, and revived imperial pride through diplomacy and faith. But Alexios faced an impossible challenge: the Turks in the east, the Normans in the west, and an increasingly powerful Latin Europe to the northwest. In desperation, he turned to the west for help. His call would summon an army unlike any the world had ever seen, an army not of nations, but of faith. The First Crusade had begun. Tens of thousands of warriors, priests, and peasants marched east to reclaim the Holy Land. But though they came as allies, they carried within them the seeds of future betrayal. At first, their victories strengthened Byzantium. The Turks were pushed back, trade revived, and Constantinople once again gleamed with prosperity. But as the Crusaders gazed upon its wealth, envy grew in their hearts. By the 12th century, the empire stood at a fragile peak, rich, cultured, yet surrounded by predators. Within its walls, intrigue poisoned the court. Families plotted against emperors. Princes blinded their rivals. And in the west, the papacy and the empire grew apart, each claiming divine authority. In 1054, the ancient bond between Rome and Constantinople shattered in what history remembers as the Great Schism. The church split in two, the Roman Catholic West and the Orthodox East. What had once been brothers in faith were now strangers, and soon enemies. And so, the stage was set. As the 12th century waned, Byzantium still glittered with gold, still echoed with hymns of divine wisdom. But behind that beauty lurked decay, betrayal, and the slow rust of arrogance.
The empire had seen rebirth and glory, triumph and terror. Now it approached its final trial, not from the east, but from those who once called themselves its allies. In the next chapter, we witness the final act of the Byzantine tragedy, when faith turns to fire once more, and the Queen of Cities faces her darkest dawn.
For more than 1,000 years, Constantinople had stood, a living miracle of marble and faith, the bridge between worlds. But in the spring of 1453, that miracle faced its final dawn. The Queen of Cities, the heart of the Byzantine Empire, was surrounded. To the west lay the crumbling ruins of Christendom's indifference. To the east, the rising power of the Ottoman Turks, led by a young and relentless sultan, Mehmed II. At only 21 years old, Mehmed dreamed of eternal glory. He would not rest until he had accomplished what no army had achieved in 1,000 years, the conquest of Constantinople. Against him stood the last emperor of Byzantium, Constantine XI Palaiologos, a man born not into splendor, but into burden. He knew his empire was dying, its treasury empty, its lands lost, its allies silent. Yet he chose to stand. On April 6, 1453, the Ottoman army appeared, a force of more than 100,000 men, their banners black with the crescent moon. Before them stood the city's defenders, barely 7,000 souls, Greeks, Genoese mercenaries, monks, and common citizens, united under a single faith and a single fate. The siege began. From dawn till dusk, the great cannons of Mehmed thundered against the walls, monstrous engines forged by a renegade Hungarian named Orban. Their roar shook the earth, their stones shattered towers that had defied centuries. Still, the walls held. The ancient Theodosian fortifications, 3 layers of stone and spirit, stood like the bones of gods. Inside the city, the people prayed. Priests carried icons through the streets. Children lit candles at the doors of broken churches. The emperor walked among them, not as a ruler, but as a brother in faith. Each night the defenders repaired the breaches, fighting by torchlight, singing hymns over the noise of war. The seawalls guarded the Golden Horn, where the Byzantines had stretched an enormous iron chain across the harbor to block enemy ships. For a time, it seemed that even in death, the empire might yet endure. Then, the unthinkable. Under cover of night, Mehmed's engineers dragged 70 ships over land, rolling them on greased logs around the chain and into the Golden Horn. The defenders awoke to find Ottoman sails within their harbor. The trap was closing. For 47 days, Constantinople resisted, alone. No help came from the West. The kingdoms of Europe watched, argued, prayed, but none moved. And so, the last remnant of Rome stood alone against the tide of history. On the night of May 28th, the city gathered in Hagia Sophia. Greek and Latin Christians, once divided by centuries of schism, knelt together beneath the same dome. The emperor himself received communion, and as he rose, he spoke softly to his soldiers. "Let us march to meet our destiny. We who are prepared to die shall not lament the end of the city, but honor it." As dawn broke on May 29, 1453, the final assault began. The Ottomans came like a storm, waves of men crashing against the walls, drums roaring, banners rising through smoke. For hours the Byzantines held. Then a small gate, the Kirka Porta, was left unguarded, and through it the invaders poured. The defenses crumbled. Constantine XI vanished into the fray.
Witnesses say he threw off his imperial robes, crying, "The city is lost, but I live as its last defender." He charged into the enemy ranks and was never seen again. By midday, the city that outlasted every siege, every empire, and every age had fallen. The crescent flag rose above Hagia Sophia. The cathedral that had echoed with the prayers of emperors now filled with the call to prayer of Islam. The Queen of Cities had become the jewel of a new empire. The Byzantine Empire, born out of the ashes of Rome, ended not in defeat, but in transformation. Its libraries, art, and wisdom flowed westward with fleeing scholars. Their knowledge would spark a new age, the Renaissance, and thus Byzantium's light did not die. It merely changed form. For over 11 centuries, Byzantium had stood as the keeper of civilization, the guardian of faith, knowledge, and beauty. It had seen empires rise and fall, kings crowned and crucified, crusaders and conquerors come and go. And through it all, it had kept one promise: to preserve the flame of Rome against the darkness. That flame now passed to others, to Italy, to Russia, to the world beyond. And though the empire fell, its spirit endures. In every church dome, in every law book, in every whisper of the word Byzantine, the city still stands. Its stones remember. For in the story of Byzantium, we find not just the fall of an empire, but the immortality of an idea. If you found value in exploring the history of Byzantium, please take a moment to hit that like button. Your support helps us fund the research for our next deep dive. What surprised you most about the Byzantine global empire? Let us know in the comments section below. We read every single one. And finally, don't let the next great untold story pass you by. Hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell to join the Chronicles of Valor community. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next chapter of history.